So I think we're all sort of tuning in these days, trying to get a handle on what's happening with the economy and, well, frankly, how it might impact our own lives.
Definitely. There's a lot of noise out there.
Exactly. And if you've been looking for a way to maybe cut through some of that noise and get a clearer picture, you've landed in the right place. Well,
We're digging into a really interesting source. It's actually a transcript from a YouTube conversation.
oh, yeah.
Yeah, from the channel. The title is Money English Learning Podcast Conversation.
Okay, so an English lesson.
Well, yes, it's framed that way, but what's great is it actually unpacks some really fundamental ideas, about money, debt, and even the economic climate.
Ah, I see. So more than just vocabulary.
Much more.
Got it. So our goal today, then, is to pull out those key insights, things about economic terms like recession and debt as they come up in this particular discussion.
Right, and we'll look at some of the language around these topics, too.
And maybe touch on different cultural views on debt. I think that came up.
It did, yeah. The idea is to get a solid grasp on some important concepts, but, without getting totally bogged down in jargon.
Perfect. Okay, let's unpack this.
So maybe we should start with some of the key vocabulary they introduced right off the bat.
Good idea. What do they lead with?
Recession. They define it as basically an economic downturn, a period where a country's overall income decreases.
Okay. Less money coming in for the country as a whole.
Exactly. And the transcript gives examples of what that looks like.
Yeah.
Job losses, people spending less money, falling stock prices, those sorts of things.
Right. The classic signs. And they linked this to the current situation.
They did mention a connection to the situation in the United States at the time. So it's not just abstract. It hits home. A recession means fewer jobs, yes, but it's more fundamental. It's a contraction.
A shrinking of the economy.
Right. And that often leads to businesses investing less, consumers getting cautious. It can kind of feed itself sometimes.
Makes sense. Okay, what other terms?
The other big one early on was broke.
Ah, broke. Simple enough.
Very simple. Just means having no money. Flat out broke.
Okay. And they used these terms in a scenario, right?
Yeah, this is where it gets interesting. They set up this dialogue with a character, Charlie, who's in debt.
Okay.
And he goes to seek help from a Mr. Corleone.
Corleone.
Seems that way, yeah,
Wow.
like a mob boss figure. But here's the twist.
What? He helps him out?
No, even Mr. Corleone claims he's broke because of the recession.
Get out. Really?
Yeah, it's a pretty compelling way to show just how widespread a recession's impact can be.
Wow. Okay. So even the guy you'd think could be fine isn't.
Exactly. It sort of underscores how economic hardship can reach, well, almost anyone. A vivid way to show the impact.
Absolutely. Okay, so moving on from those core definitions, they also dug into some specific language points from that exchange.
They did. First up was loan,
Loan.
defined simply as borrowed money. And they made a little note to distinguish it from a loan, L-O-N-N versus A-L-O-N-E.
Right. Small difference in spelling, big difference in meaning.
Crucial difference, yeah. Then they talked about mortgage.
Ah, the big one for many people.
Definitely. Explained as a specific type of loan, the one used for buying property.
Right. Houses, apartments.
Exactly. And they even pointed out the pronunciation that the T in mortgage is silent.
A mortgage. Yeah, you don't say the P. That's a good tip.
That kind of detail is super helpful, especially for language learners.
For sure. What else?
Then they looked at the phrase, hit me pretty hard.
Okay, hit me pretty hard. What's the meaning there?
It just means something had a strong negative effect on you.
Okay, like bad news.
Yeah, or a difficult event. The examples they gave were things like a divorce or getting a really bad cold.
Oh, okay.
Or the death of a pet was another one. Things that really impact you negatively.
I see. So you can easily connect that to a recession, right? Losing your job, struggling with bills. That would definitely hit you pretty hard.
Absolutely. That's the connection.
Okay. And there was one more word in that section.
Yes, tuition.
Tuition, money for school.
Exactly. Money paid for studying.
Yeah.
Usually college or university, but they noted sometimes even public schools in some countries might have tuition fees.
Right. And this came up in the dialogue.
Yeah, it was mentioned as one of the financial burdens the character Charlie was dealing with.
So if you think about it, these words, loan, mortgage, tuition, they aren't just random vocabulary, are they?
Not at all. They represent major financial commitments for loads of people.
Huge commitments.
So when someone says a recession hit them hard,
Yeah.
it often means Their ability to manage these really crucial payments has been seriously undermined.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Okay, so then the transcript shifted gears a bit, right, towards fluency.
It did, yeah.
Yeah.
It looked at alternative ways to say common things, maybe more natural-sounding ways.
Like what?
Well, the first one was instead of just asking, can I help you,
Uh-huh.
you could say, what can I do for you?
What can I do for you? Okay, how is that different?
They pointed out it can sound a bit more polite, maybe more proactive, like you're really offering assistance.
Yeah, I can see that. It sounds a bit warmer sometimes.
Exactly. Then they tackled ways to say, I'm sorry to bother you.
Okay, always a useful one. What did they suggest?
I'm really sorry to trouble you.
Trouble you. Okay.
And they gave examples like, if you need someone's signature or you have to ask to leave work early or even just borrow a pen.
Right, situations where you might be imposing slightly.
Yeah. And the idea, I think, is that trouble might imply a little more consideration for the other person's time or effort than just bother. A subtle difference.
Interesting nuance. Okay, and the last one in that section.
The phrase, on top of all that.
On top of all that, what does that signify?
It just means besides that, or in addition to, basically adding another thing to a list of things that have already happened.
Okay, so like piling things on.
Exactly. And they showed how it works for both bad and good situations.
Oh, how so?
Well, the negative example was like, you lose your job,
Yeah.
and then your car gets stolen, and then your girlfriend breaks up with you.
Yeah.
So it's one thing on top of another.
Ouch. Right. A cascade of bad luck.
Yeah. But then the positive example was, like, it's your birthday, your friends are there.
Yeah.
And on top of all that, you get loads of great presents.
Okay. So it just means adding more to the pile, good or bad.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And this phrase feels particularly relevant when we talk about economics, doesn't it?
How do you mean?
Well, during a recession, people often face multiple problems at once. Maybe they lose their job, on top of having existing debt, on top of the cost of living going up.
Yeah, it's rarely just one thing, is it? It compounds.
Exactly. So understanding on top of all that helps describe that compounding financial strain.
That's a really good point. Which actually leads nicely into another area they touched on, the whole idea of debt itself.
Right. How different cultures view it.
Yeah, they contrasted North America with Europe, specifically Switzerland, I think.
That's right. And it's fascinating because the underlying philosophies seem really different.
How so? In North America, Canada and the U.S. were mentioned.
Yeah. The transcript highlighted this idea that building a credit history is often seen as really important.
Right. You need good credit to get loans.
Exactly. And building that history often involves taking on debt, like credit cards, small loans, and then paying it back reliably.
So you almost have to get into debt to prove you can handle debt.
That's often the way it works, yeah. They even mentioned banks actively marketing credit cards to university students back in the day.
Wow, really encouraging early engagement with debt.
Seems like it. But, isn't there a potential downside to a system where you almost need to be in debt to build that crucial credit score?
That's a really good question. It does seem a bit counterintuitive, doesn't it? Like, avoiding debt completely could actually make it harder to borrow for a big purchase later on.
Exactly. Now, contrast that with the picture painted of Switzerland.
Okay, what's the Swiss approach, according to the source?
Much more cautious. It sounds like having savings is often a requirement before you can even get a credit card.
Really? Like, you need money to get access to credit?
Yeah. The example given was needing to deposit, say, 700 Swiss francs just to get a credit card that only lets you spend up to 500 francs.
Wow. So the limit is less than your deposit.
Seems like in that example, it really underscores a different cultural value, doesn't it? More emphasis on financial prudence, on avoiding debt.
That's a stark difference. So North America, debt as a tool almost to build history. Switzerland, debt as something to be avoided, savings first.
That seems to be the contrast presented, yes. It highlights how much cultural norms can shape financial behavior and risk tolerance.
And if you think back to the dialogue in the source, Charlie and Mr. Corleone.
Right. These different cultural viewpoints could definitely color how someone in their situation feels about their debt, or how willing they are to ask for or give a loan.
Yeah, in a culture where debt is more normalized, maybe Charlie's situation feels different than it would in a culture that really emphasizes staying out of debt.
Precisely. The social context matters.
Okay, so just to kind of pull this all together, we've looked at what recession means, what broke means.
Got through key money words like loan, mortgage, tuition.
Right, and that phrase hit me pretty hard.
And we explored some fluency builders, those alternative ways to say things like, what can I do for you? Or sorry to trouble you.
And on top of all that. Can't forget that one.
Definitely not. And then we wrapped up with that really interesting contrast in how different cultures, specifically North America versus Switzerland in this case, view debt.
Yeah, that cultural perspective is fascinating.
It really is. And it kind of leaves you wondering, doesn't it, thinking about these different perspectives. What does shape a whole society's attitude towards borrowing and lending?
Like, what are the underlying factors?
Yeah. And how might those different attitudes affect how individuals actually cope financially when the economy does take a downturn? How does it impact their well-being during those shifts?
That definitely gives you something to mull over. It makes you think about your own relationship with debt and saving too, I suppose.
For sure. It's worth reflecting on.
Well, thanks for diving deep into that with us today. Lots to think about.
Thank you. It was interesting to unpack.